Torsk's timely strike. In the direction of Lyman, Russian forces are desperately gathering supplies to attack Nevsky. Seeing this, the Ukrainians immediately launched an offensive from southern Torsk, repelling the Russian breakthrough. At the Zerbets River, Russian troops have been struggling for nearly a year and a half to eliminate the Ukrainian bridgehead on the east bank, but with almost no success and heavy losses. Realizing they couldn't succeed, the Russians started thinking of a new tactic. First, seize Ukrainian settlements along the river, then capture the bridges to disrupt Ukrainian logistics and gradually push back the Ukrainian forces. Recently, Russian troops intensified their assault on the settlement of Nevsky, which still has a bridge. This time, they deployed their heavy weaponry, including the TOWs, one of thermal rocket launchers, only about 30 units remaining. Looking at the map, the Russians hold the high ground while Ukrainian Nevsky is in a lower position, as is the southern front, where the Ukrainian forces are also in a low-lying area. However, the south is relatively secure thanks to a group of elite Ukrainian troops in the Syryansky forest who decimate the Russian forces whenever they show up. In Nevsky, the Ukrainians aren't as fortunate. Thermal rockets bombarded them one after another, and the Russians sent over 30 armored vehicles. Unable to hold their ground, the Ukrainians had to retreat gradually. However, the Russians, despite their advantages, failed to fully secure Nevsky. Since it's a lowland area, the retreating Ukrainians climbed to the high ground west of the river, and the Russian troops in the town began to suffer heavy losses. With Russian forces concentrating on major operations in Nevsky, the supply lines to the southern Syryansky forest positions became strained, creating defensive gaps. The Ukrainians seized the opportunity to counterattack, reclaiming several positions in the northwestern Torsk forest. Examining the topographic map, we see Ukrainian forces attempting to advance along the ridge. If successful, this would place Ukrainians in a highly advantageous position, threatening Russian progress and supply lines in both the north and south. Russian troops recognized this threat and immediately mobilized tanks and manpower to engage the Ukrainians in the northwestern Torsk forest, deploying multiple armored personnel carriers, tanks, and even a turtle tank. However, the area was already saturated with Ukrainian kamikaze drones, completely neutralizing the Russian mechanized assault. The turtle tank was also destroyed. The Russian counterattack in the northwestern Torsk forest was crushed, allowing Ukrainians to continue pressuring Russian supply lines in Nevsky, where Russian troops are struggling. There have been numerous similar instances in the past where Russian forces launched costly offensives to seize lowland Ukrainian positions, but were eventually worn down by extended supply lines. In the coming days, we may witness significant Russian losses in this area. Xi's ICBM blunder. Hezbollah's electronic equipment has been repeatedly destroyed, leaving Nasrallah almost as a lone commander. Russia's 4 attempts to launch intercontinental missiles have consecutively failed, prompting Xi Jinping to take bold actions. On the morning of September 25th at 8:44 a.m., China launched an intercontinental missile without a nuclear warhead, aiming to consolidate its dominance within the evil axis of nations, according to Japanese military assessments. The missile's warhead ultimately landed in international waters south of Hawaii, clearly targeting the U.S. Pacific Command near Pearl Harbor. Just an hour before the missile launch, at 7:33 a.m. Beijing time, China fired a carrier rocket, creating a decoy scenario. Clearly, Xi's intention is to mix civilian rockets with missiles for sudden strikes in future conflicts. Officially, it was declared an annual military exercise, but China's last missile launch toward the Pacific was in 1980. Is this the 40th annual routine training? According to intelligence from Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, this launch bypassed the normal approval process of China's Central Military Commission. Instead, Xi directly ordered it through a secret office under a military group, keeping the rocket force commander and vice chairman of the Maitre Comité de Rocket Force Commander and various European and Milibert. In reality, this non-nuclear test launch was merely a show in an actual conflict. Any nuclear-armed weapon would be detected by global reconnaissance satellites, potentially triggering a first strike before the button is pressed. Therefore, this non-nuclear test was more about boosting internal morale and providing the U.S. with a pretext to take action early. Hezbollah reported over 3,000 casualties from the bombings, though the actual number may be higher. Putin's associates were also affected, and Xi's personnel were not spared. Chinese covert operatives in the Middle East had their outdated communication devices destroyed, with no one daring to come forward, as exposure would label them as terrorists. Reports indicate that the Central Liaison Department's Middle East Bureau lost dozens of contact lines and over 100 secret communication channels, making it impossible to maintain contact. Some operatives used small shops for meetings, others acted as messengers in restaurants, but now all are cut off, rendering missions impossible. China's once proud covert networks have completely collapsed. Why did this happen? Because China planned to launch a so-called spring offensive against the U.S. in October, and the U.S. couldn't allow it. Russia's continuous missile failures have unsettled all its affiliates, revealing that their so-called trump card was mere bluff, purely a ploy to deceive conscripts. Thus, Xi had to show force. This intercontinental missile launch not only had to succeed, but also had to catch the US completely off guard. Can't we do it? Let us show you by successfully launching. China's defense ministry even included English in their promotional materials this time, clearly aiming to announce to the world that the moment to turn the tide has arrived. Have they ever done this before? However, this perfectly suits the US. No intelligence could surpass Xi's self-destructive actions, as he personally showcases his willingness to push the world towards confrontation. This missile launch is a declaration of war against the West and could drastically change the current situation. Next, the U.S. House of Representatives will undoubtedly hold a hearing swiftly, with the Department of Defense and the White House responding immediately. The U.S. military will urgently meet to assess China's launch and determine if there was any prior intelligence. Are there military communication mechanisms between China and the U.S.? Was there any advance notice or indication of the launch site? If not, this is a covert operation. The U.S. will review all electronic and satellite monitoring to see if anything was detected in advance. If nothing was found, how did China manage it? If the missile was launched from a silo, preparation should have started 24 hours earlier. For liquid-fueled missiles, refueling must have been done in advance. For solid-fueled mobile launches, were satellites not able to capture it? Or did they use some form of camouflage? If none of these were detected, it's clear China executed a series of covert operations. The U.S. is even more concerned that with such powerful intercontinental missiles, if China can launch them at will without being stopped, America might have to resort to a first strike. Otherwise, nuclear weapons could be triggered at any time, directly threatening global security. Moreover, there are intelligence reports suggesting that China and Russia might launch attacks against the U.S. in October. Regardless of the truth of these intelligence reports, a first strike becomes a reasonable option. Xi Jinping's move is essentially digging. That's all for today's special report. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to stay updated with our coverage. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.